Mexico has filed a declaration of intervention with the International Court of Justice in the case against Israel concerning the application of the Genocide Convention in Gaza. Invoking Article 63, Mexico aims to provide its perspective on the convention's provisions. South Africa filed proceedings against Israel in late December, claiming Israel was breaching the Genocide Convention with its military actions in the Gaza Strip. Then in late January, Nicaragua filed an application for permission to intervene as a party in the case. Colombia filed for the same position in April, as did Libya in early May, and now Mexico. The ICJ will allow South Africa and Israel to respond to Mexico's intervention. And we're back in studio with Lieutenant Colonel in Reserve Jonathan Conricus. You're hearing now that Mexico is joining in here at the ICJ, and this really brings up questions about the world, many nations now joining along in this case against Israel. How does that make you feel?
Well, it reinforces something that I've been speaking about for quite some time, is that I think that our PR efforts need to be handled totally differently, and that we need to start looking at it from a national perspective and really taking this seriously. I think claims by Mexico, who really I fail to see their relevance to the topic, how they even have anything to say about what's going on in Gaza, but I put that aside, and probably has something to do with them wanting to anger the Americans, I'd suppose. But bottom line is that I think that we have to up our game strategically and to enhance our communications in a totally different way. And I'm not talking about only having talented spokespeople, but I'm talking about assessing our public relations as a strategic enabler, nothing less, and to really manage our operations accordingly. I think that this Mexican decision is part of a tide that we will see of more countries, institutions, politicians who think that it's in and in vogue to attack Israel and to make these baseless, unfounded allegations against Israel, which are false and not based on fact at all, and to chime into the chorus. And I think it's very unfortunate that another country does it. But I think that what Israel can do differently is to communicate the tremendous efforts that Israel is taking on the ground in order to minimize the effect on civilians. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth than to say that Israel is attempting to do genocide. If that was the case, then of course there would be many, many, many more dead Palestinians, and that is not what Israel is doing.
We're seeing now some visuals of riots outside the Israeli embassy in Mexico City. There's anti-Israel sentiment all across, really. Has it also overtaken Mexico now, do you think?
Well, I just came back from a week-long visit to the UK, and before that, another week in Scandinavia. The common denominator that I see from what I've heard and spoken with people there is that in many cities around the world, law enforcement has kind of given up on implementing law and order and on protecting Jewish communities, and that it's fair game to be out in the streets and to march fascist and genocidal slogans from the river to the sea against Jews. It's fair game to attack synagogues, and it's okay to build encampments out of parliaments, as they're doing in Oslo. Mm-hmm. Many things that are illegal are being done by Hamas supporters and supporters of terrorism. And I think the common denominator here is Jewish communities that really fear for their security, that are being really abandoned by local law enforcement. And the sad thing is that many people around the world, I would say a silent majority in most Western countries, they don't support Hamas, they don't support this genocidal, barbaric organization, and they don't support what Hamas stands for or what the Palestinians are doing. But they see these demonstrations and they see how terror supporters around the world are marching and dominating the public sphere, and maybe they're convinced by it. I think it's very dangerous, and we know from the past what starts with the Jews doesn't end with the Jews, and once you spiral out of control, and once there isn't an effective policing and law and order in a community, then very bad things can happen. I'm concerned mostly about what that means for Jewish communities and for Israelis, and I think that there should be strong pushback in Jewish communities and speaking with law enforcement to make sure that law and order are upheld.